Hey everybody. After a little bit of a time away, I've decided to start back up these conversations that we had specifically through quarantine and then a little bit after that. A lot of things going on in our world today, and I think we need to talk about it. And so I want to talk today about bubbles. Have you ever thought about bubbles? I'm not a big fan. I really don't like them. When I had little kids, my kids aren't little anymore, but when they were little, bubbles was the rage. In fact, we just had a chance to get away over this last week, and one of the things that one of my kids picked out, which they don't play with bubbles anymore, but it was a bubble blower. And they're like, oh, this is so cool, I have to have it. I'm like, why? No, bubbles, ugh, they're terrible. First of all, when they pop in your eye, they burn, right? The soap gets in your eyes. Second, when your kids are little, they spill everywhere. They're absolutely awful. And third, they're just annoying when they're flying through the air, especially when somebody else blows them. Maybe not one of your kids, but when like you're in a crowd and there's somebody walking around with a bubble blower and there's bubbles flying everywhere. I don't know why, but that annoys me. You know, there's another reason why I don't like bubbles. And one of the main reasons I don't like bubbles is because every single one of us creates them. Not the ones that you blow, not the ones with soap, but in our lives we create bubbles. Bubbles that we live in, bubbles that we place ourselves in. And it's so easy to get stuck in our own bubble that we don't understand what's going on outside of that bubble. This chance to get away where my child picked out the bubble blower was a great opportunity for me to remember that there's more outside of my own bubble. Because see, here's the deal. I also create bubbles. And it's easy for me to get stuck in this zone and only see things the way that I want to see things and only let things into this bubble. But to get outside of my bubble and get perspective, you're reminded there is a big world out there. See, we live in a world today where we keep creating bubbles. And each one of us puts ourselves inside of that bubble. Call it a comfort zone, call it whatever you want. I'm gonna call it a bubble for the sake of this video. But we put ourselves in it and we try to protect ourselves. We don't allow anything else inside our bubble. If there's a differing perspective, it has to stay out. If there's a differing way to do things, it has to stay out. If it makes me uncomfortable, it has to stay out of my bubble. See, yet when I read scripture, I don't see Jesus creating a bubble. If anything, I see him being someone who stepped into very uncomfortable spaces. Why? So he could relate to the people that were in those spaces. We need to do a better job of that. Have you created a bubble? Are you keeping yourself locked away? Are you able to get out of your bubble? Are you able to see a different perspective and maybe connect with somebody that doesn't necessarily see the world the way that you do? Because when we create bubbles, when we limit our perspective, we actually cause more harm than help. Because there are people out there that may just need what you have inside your bubble. So don't allow it to stay there. See, we live in a world today that needs a different perspective. And that perspective is focused on not themselves, but this man named Jesus. And that's exactly the season we're going in. We're going into a season of Christmas. A season focused on Jesus and the birth of the Messiah, and a message that the whole world needs to hear. And so oftentimes we create bubbles to protect ourselves. But how about this Christmas season? We poke that bubble and pop it and step outside of it and see more of Jesus in this season. And maybe when we see some of who he is in a different way, that then people will see something in us that will cause them to think a little bit differently too. So in this Christmas season, pop your bubble, get outside your comfort zone, focus on Christ through this season, and maybe see something a little bit different. And in doing so, maybe people will see something different in you. Have a great week.